the SEMIC action, its objectives, the effort to promote and reuse the semantic assets, as well as to raise awareness of the importance of data and metadata management. So we won't waste any time on this. You're all familiar also with the core vocabularies and the different application profiles, such as the current one that we are tackling. And here is somehow what has been done under the context of the webinars that have been conducted under the context of DCAT-AP for a high-value dataset, as well as a DCAT-AP version 3. So what is the current status? We started from the early year, and we conducted the webinar the 7th of November in order to tackle specifically issues that are related to the high value data set, and tackle also issues that are related to the status and the governance. And we are here today to try to tackle issues that are purely related to the DCAT-AP version 3 in order to boost for the next official release. So I pass the floor to Bert with the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Pavlina. So as already mentioned, we will have in our agenda 3 levels of topics to be tackled, and a number of detailed topics, a number of topics that have directly related with alignment to DCAT, in particular to DCAT's 3 new topics on it, a few on DCAT 2, so datasets, services, data services, and then we have a section or a discussion on cross-concern topics which have to do with profile creation. That will be after the break. So Max will guide us through it, and so yeah, we go one by one, and we have hopefully get valuable input from your side. So we'll start with the detailed issues, so the concrete issues. We have listed them on GitHub already, so they are flagged with a blue identifier, what we would tackle today. And we'll go one by one over it, and some of them are kind of straightforward questions. So the first one we would like to tackle is the question whether or not we are going to increase extra metadata or recommend extra metadata on the data service. And this has been lifted from the discussions in DCAT-AP high-value datasets. In that context, there was the observation made that a data service is a cataloged resource at the same level of a dataset. And for a dataset, we recommend to have a publisher. So why we would not recommend that same property for a data service? So I'll ask you, and this is a very quick question, and this is our proposition, if you would agree with our proposition to make publisher a recommended property for data service. So
any comments there? Any objections?
Yeah, if you agree, +1 as Matthias does. So if you say it's all fine for me.
Yes, current status is optional.
Yes, the current state is indeed optional. Yeah.
There were more suggestions. There were an issue 272 where I suggested also make ContactPoint keyword theme.
Yeah, they come later. Matthias,
okay.
we have put them on later on. So this one okay. we have a few that are
+1s. I see +1s. I don't see. I'm particularly interested if people disagree. Make sure that if you disagree, you put in the -1 so that we can look at your objections. But for the time being, I see everybody in agreement with making publisher recommended for data service. Okay.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Okay, so we have a topic that was raised as well in the context of the high-value datasets on the level of vCard on the ContactPoint. So this is the range class that the ContactPoint is representing. And the question was there, vCard kind, we refer to it, but it has a number of subclasses: group, individual, location, organization. And the question was, should we recommend to use only one of these 4 subclasses? If we look into our specification as it is today, there's no such recommendation over there. There is as well no evidence that we should do it. So this is a question if you would agree to keep it as is. So at this moment, we will not make any additional explicit recommendation. That is our proposal. But if there's any need that you see, we should recommend the use of those subclasses. So,
okay. So the recommendation is that we don't not make an explicit recommendation.
Yeah. And we see Matthias' hands raised.
I just want to know whether it is acceptable to provide these subclasses. From a harvesting perspective, it's also good to know what you need to look for. I would expect that individual or organization would be acceptable things to also check for, in addition to kind for those that don't want to specify.
It is acceptable. So it's acceptable to share it as this. That's not a problem.
Therefore, mentioning that perhaps would be a good idea, but I don't know if that is always the case. Knowing of all potential subclasses of a class is, in general, in the open world design world, hard. Yes, therefore, from a harvesting perspective, we could perhaps provide a recommendation that if you want to, these are the 4 allowed, or the 4 we would expect to look for.
Yeah, that are the only ones that we expect at the moment. So if we align ourselves with vCard, then these 4 are the only possibilities. So it's limiting ourselves to vCard. Anyhow.
So what do you mean with explicit recommendation to not make any recommendation? Or we say, is this an implicit rule all over the place? You don't use on any subclasses?
No, so the recommendation of this, the proposal is at this moment not to add anything extra. So at this moment, there's no indication you should do it. There's no indication in the specification you are not allowed to do it. It's left open. This is the current case at this moment.
May I make a counter proposition here then? To just mention that these are the 4 that you could use.
Mm-hmm.
So implementers know what to look for.
Yes, we can do that. That's equivalent as today. So
it is an additional
reference.
Just a clarification, I mean.
Yeah.
It's additional usage note.
There's an additional usage note with references to those 4 subclasses. We can.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's I keeps it at the same level.
Any comments on that? Any agreement for this proposal with the additional usage note? People, again, put a +1 or a -1 if you don't agree. I don't see people currently responding to that. People are still putting in their affiliations, but Nuno says +1 with the usage note. That was the proposal. The proposal plus usage note. And Matthias is okay.
Yeah, okay. It's not the goal to narrow it down. That's not the goal. No.
So I have seen all +1s so far. So if there's no -1s, please do so if you don't agree. If there's no -1s, I suggest that we move on to the next point, Brett.
Okay, good. We move on to the next. This is a topic that was raised on the property type of an agent. So this property was introduced as in DCAT 1 when there was a sole agent relating active in DCAT or in DCAT-AP, which was the publisher. And everything therefore in the semantics or in the the context of the agent was relating to publishing a data set. And that you see in the property type, so the type of an agent that makes the catalog or the data set available. So this relates to the act of publishing. And so the comment was, well, there are many more roles that an agent can interact with a data set or a catalog resource. So please remove that activity of the definition, but then we end up in the definition for a type of an agent, which is kind of circular. So the proposal is to change it to the nature of the agent, to give it at least not to a circular definition, and to give a bit of the broad opening of the kind of agent we're talking about. So the question is, so do we agree with the change of the definition?
Does this actually, Bert, is related to the next slide?
The next slide I come later. That's
okay.
That's a separate topic.
So Matthias is in agreement with the change in phrasing, the nature of the agent as the definition of type. Anybody in disagreement? Anybody in agreement? Plus ones and minus ones, if you like. I see plus ones coming in. Don't see minus ones yet. Not many reactions yet. So please, if you don't agree with the proposal, put in a minus one.
If you're uncertain and you agree, you can as well put a 0 just to indicate that we know if you're really uncertain about it. Okay.
Okay, so we have lots of zeros. Maybe that's a point. A proposal from Geraldine to change the nature of the agent to the nature of the responsible party.
Yeah, or the role of the responsible party. Yeah, the role, it's not a role.
It's not a role, it's the nature.
It's really, they reveal the kinds of
what kind of thing it is. Yeah.
What kind of thing it is. And it is not its role in it. So it's really the kind of thing.
So the proposal from Geraldine is to change agent to responsible party.
Yeah, that's acceptable for me.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
But then we have a changed proposal. So I'm just asking people to again vote on the nature of the responsible party. Okay. That plus ones again. There's a number of zeros, Bert. I think maybe in the GitHub issue, we will ask people also to say what their hesitance is for this issue, so that there might be a little bit more of explanation necessary for this, for people to understand what the proposal is and what the implications are, because I think that probably it is people do not know exactly what the implications are of the change.
Yeah, and this is one of the things. I'll come to the next, where it's one of the implications.
Yeah, so I see some people that put zeros are not putting plus ones for the nature of the responsible party. So in a way, I don't see any, certainly don't see any minus ones. I see a need for some clarification maybe, but overall, the people think this is a good idea to make the change.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
a brief comment.
Yes.
When we have something like an intermediate blank nodes and we have a role, then we are saying something about an agent in the context of a data set. In this case, we don't do that. This is a triple directly on the agent, a statement on the agent.
Yes.
Therefore, it should perhaps potentially be a problem to say responsible party, because it has the same kind of language we use when we talk about the role in relation to something. Yeah. Here we are stating something that is always true about an organization. The roles we already have, or the types we already have. is academia, company, industrial consortium, local authority, private individual, regional authority, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And they should always be true. So maybe the nature of the agents is, in that sense, more true to the statement in itself.
Yeah, Brett?
Yeah, okay. So we...
we also said nature of the agent, but I saw that Songbird, for example, changed his vote from 0 to +1 when we changed the agent to responsible party. Songbird, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yes, I can say something. Basically, the nature of the problem is with the responsible party part, right? So the nature of the agent. So so for me, nature of the agent is like it's a better name than the type of the agent, because type is very generic, but the nature of the agent is maybe better. However, I kind of agree that responsible party is already a role, so that part maybe can go out. So maybe the nature of the agent is how does that sound?
Okay.
That was the original proposal.
You're coming back to the previous proposal, and which you had a 0.
I wasn't.
Or,
yes, sorry, I didn't understand that. But the nature of the agent. I see. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Okay, so let's go back to the original proposal. I think the nature of the agent. I think we had lots of +1s. There might still be a need in the GitHub issue to have a little bit of a more explanation of the proposal, Bert.
Yeah.
And then for the time being, we'll accept that the proposal has been accepted.
Yeah, then we can still come back to it, but we will late to it. So because the next slide of the next topic, which relates to it, it's more complicated and has the impact on this definition change a bit, and the work that we are doing as well with the transfer of the controlled vocabularies. So what we observed, of course, is that there's a recommended code list associated with this property. So there's a code list associated. So Matthias already mentioned some values of that. And we are in the process of transferring this to the EU vocabularies. However, we observed as well that in the context of the core business vocabulary, there is this activity that's ongoing on the legal form type or the legal type, and that is very closely overlapping with this code list. It's a more detailed list. So the glyph legal form type is way more detailed, but it is very similar to that. So it, instead of having business, it has the different forms of the businesses into it. So the biggest challenge why we wanted to go, and the proposal is to change it or to try to use that one, is that this is the more precise categorization of the nature of the agent as it is, so the type of organization that you have, because the other ones are, let's say, interpretations sometimes of how somebody would look at it. So at this moment, that is the thing that we would like to avoid. So our proposal is that we could use the EU vocabularies new code list, and that this is a little bit more precise than the current one, but basing itself on the legal entity type. So this is probably a major change in terms of practice or in usage. So the question is, do you agree it's with it or not?
So your proposal is to change from a non-maintained sort of vocabulary that is not complete to an international standard
Yes, to the one that will be maintained and
for which the
operated.
codes are maintained by publications office. But
Exactly.
as you say, the impact is if people have been using the terms in the ADMS STOS file, then they need to change. It's
Yes.
a different thing. So, Matthias?
Yeah, so it is used in Sweden at least. I think we have seen it as something useful to maybe also, we don't do that yet, but we have been thinking about filtering on data sets based on which kind of publisher or we have, based if they are in academia or in corporate. So this GLAIF, I don't have a full knowledge about that one, so I don't know. I assume it's more targeted towards the business domain, which may indicate that we don't get the same kind of coverage in detail. So can you please say something where this GLAIF comes from, if it has the same kind of detail division in all areas, not just in the business domain?
So it has, so about the process. So this GLAIF is indeed more about the business domain, but it will be published and will be republished by the publications office. So that's activity that we are ongoing doing. And there will be active maintenance on it. And there's interest to establish a working group around that area to use it more to categorize organizations in the broader sense. So it is, if we would say today, what is missing, I think academia is missing. I think that's one that will be probably missing. And the other one was, I forgot about mine. There's two that are missing, that are not having a one-to-one counterpart. All the others have a one-to-one counterpart, but sometimes in a more detailed way. So not business as such, but you are an association with no business gains or something like this. So different legal entities you have in your country.
So I understand that there is an added value of not maintaining two different, but is there a use case where is anyone asking for this? Would it be sensible to have this more fine-grained division? If not, this will of course cause a lot of scripts that has to be written. You have to convert people, or
Yes,
convince them,
we know.
and so on.
Yes, so there are two things into it. There is the impact is substantial. That's the reason why I created a separate issue out of it. It is about the nature of the agent, so it's really about associating this. This is about the information of the agent, and it should be pullable in theory from your business register or so on. It should be corresponding to the real legal status that this organization has. Now, if you, as you mentioned it, we would like to categorize it in some context of some role. That is a specific use case, and that is outside of this association, of course. So if we are looking for that objective, then the type, as we defined just before, the nature of the agent, is something that is depending on the role it plays. You might have a different categorization of the same agent. So that is the challenge that we are with this property having with the code list and the property. Then.
So, does that answer your question, Matthias?
A bit.
Other
It still
comments?
would be nice to know if anyone else sees a problem with this. The data portal, for the European data portal, for instance, is there any? So Simon in the participant list, would there be problems in doing this conversion?
We will not do any conversation in this regard. But if it's a switch between DCAT-AP versions, so this means if you use ADMS SCOS, it means it's not 3.0, which is at least one indicator where we can derive the version from, but the other way around may not work that good. In general, we have no issues which vocabulary is used and which is then specified. But if we do, for instance, validation with the shackle shapes, and there are shackle shapes for DCAT-AP 3.0, we are still not able to determine the used DCAT-AP version from the data set to select the right shackle shapes when we validate. So we use always the latest shackle shapes, and this would mean if there is a data set with DCAT-AP version 2.1.1 and we use the shackle shape from 3, they will not be compliant because they use another vocabulary.
So, any other comments there?
And beside that, sorry,
Just a quick question. So currently, is there a recommended vocabulary or not?
Yeah, there is a recommended vocabulary, yes, in the
ADMS file.
Yeah.
There's a publisher type ADMS in the file.
So I feel hesitation, so people don't know yet what's the impact about it. So I would propose that then we ask your comments on this issue on 320. Let's see what is the impact and think it over as well with the previous slides of the change of to the nature of the agent in the generic sense. What do you want to see as the nature of the agents? And additional question I would ask is to the community is then, is there any way that we would like to organize in a standardized way, to group in a standardized way, the agents that are participating on the data portal catalog? Because if that's a different question and objective, and we have not maybe spelled out that objective very clearly. So if there's need or need for that, then we can see how we can combine everything together.
Okay, Bert, can we just in issue 320 then create a comment ourselves with the questions that we have that we are asking so that people can react to those?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. And then we'll keep that on the back burner for the moment, and then we'll move to the next point on the agenda.
Okay, good. So here it was a request for, if we move now to the entity catalog records, and there's a property which has its label change type, which is mapped on ADMS status. And this property, again, is one that has been existing quite a long while in DCAT-AP. And it indicates how the metadata of the catalog resource that is referenced by this catalog record is changed, updated, removed, etc. What are the changes into it? And that's the reason why it is called change type. So the question and the request was, can we change it to status? So I would like to open it just a little bit more in the sense that, just changing it to status becomes very generic, but then it doesn't reflect anymore this original intent in the label. So I would asking here for additional suggestions and be in that sense backwards compatible with the idea of indicating the change or the evolution of the cataloged, the metadata of the cataloged resource in the context of a catalog. So that is the question. So it's a request for information.
Is in issue number 295 for people to react to the proposed change, or give suggestions for another type of change.
But
so
to
that's
make it more better to match it. So the remark was it doesn't fit, or it's not aligned with entirely with DCAT, W3C DCAT. And I would ask if there's additional argumentation and ways that we can improve this property.
okay. That's for issue number 295, and then we'll wait for the community's comments on those, and then we can move to the next one. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this one we would like your opinion about. So there's a property called Application Profile in the catalog records. It's mapped on DC terms conforms to, and at this moment there is at max cardinality 1, and it indicates the application profile in which the dataset metadata is being created. Now with our annexes, so DCAT-AP high value dataset, you can actually have a dataset that is encoded as DCAT-AP and encoded as DCAT-AP high value datasets, and maybe to other sub profiles of DCAT-AP. So in order to indicate that, the max cardinality is not anymore sufficient. So you're blocked by this one. So the proposal is to lift the cardinality.
Okay. That's a clear proposal, I think. So any comments, any acceptances, any objections?
C plus ones. Okay, I think this is accepted.
Okay, that looks good. Yeah. So then we move to the next one.
Okay, so the next one is about the property access rights. And prior going on the different issues, and there are 2 issues filed on extra clarifications. I would like to highlight first what is the information that is available on it. So the property access rights exists in our profile on data service and data sets, and it's referencing a right statement that you can express. So these are the definitions, and on each of them, and you see that the definitions are slightly different, to indicating a different kind of use in each of the kind of information you expect that is appropriate to the kind of class, to the class where it is associated with. And the property as well has a recommended or a mandatory code list from the publications office. So these are the information that is available in the specification and where we have to act upon. So the first topic is about the property access rights in the context of a data set. And if we look to that definition, then there is the word open data, the term open data is into the definition. And this term is a term that comes with a lot of expectations. And that is getting some kind of a mismatch between expectations, is the value that has to be set, etc. So I think we should consider open data as a policy term, comes with a number of requirements, not only on this single value, but on this property, but as well on associated metadata like licenses, access limitations, how the distributions are being organized, etc. What is all these kind of things of information that is available? So open data comes with a number of let's say, expectations, and we are expressing them in various properties. And we see that sometimes there are slightly different expectations allowed in different member states. So our proposal is to lift and to remove the term open data from the definition and replace it in a way where we reference to level of accessibility. And the proposal is information that indicates whether the dataset, that's the same, is public or open accessible, has access restrictions, or is not public. So it's replacing the term open data to is public/open accessible. So that is the concrete proposal to avoid the term open data into it with the associated expectations with that.
I see Alberto.
Thank you. Sorry to disagree. So I guess that for the example, for data service requires an API, but the data service is not providing data, it's providing a service. So this example, I don't think that is accurate. And level of accessibility is even worse than open data because accessibility is even more ambiguous than open data. Open data has clear definition, while accessibility has two different connotations. So I don't think that we are improving the definition by removing this.
Two things, Alberto. You referred now when you started talking to data service. We're talking here about the data.
No, in the example provided in the slide, so is providing an example for data service.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that is relevant for this case because we are talking about data set.
No, but just to say that there are different expectations sometimes associated with a data set. For instance, and this is the example here, if you're in Belgium, you can regard something as open data, even if the data service that is associated with it requires an API key. It's an acceptable case. In Czechia, Jakub mentioned that, say this would be considered not very good, and then say, okay, not acceptable to consider that data set as open data. So this is just to indicate that there are expectations on requirements on the whole area of a data set that is different from one country to another country, from one interpretation to another interpretation, and we didn't want to have it now anymore into the definition. So we don't want to have the discussion that the definition is explicitly saying, okay, we have a value in the list, in the code list, that indicates this is open data.
So Bert, I think that's correct. I think Alberto has a good point that your examples are sort of indirectly related to data sets. That is not a very good example, but I think we understand what the issue is about differences of the understanding of open data between countries. But the other part that Alberto said is that we should avoid the term accessibility, because that's not that's also has could create confusion, but that is actually not in the proposed new definition. The proposed new definition only says.
Let me reconvene my statement, because I guess that is partially right, but we are mixing two things, because one is the accessibility, and another thing is what you can do with the access asset. So, and in terms of accessibility, I guess that the proposal could be right. So saying that a level of accessibility, that's right. But there is another thing, which is once you have accessed the data, what you can do with it, which is the license. But now I guess that we are mixing in access rights attribute. Somehow, maybe it's not the idea, but we are mixing both approaches, and therefore any definition that we include will be somehow incorrect depending on the on the sense that you have to take it, either the accessibility or what you can do with the contents.
Yeah, but I don't think we're mixing it here. Actually, what the definition here doesn't say anything about what you can do with it. It only says how you can access it. So
if it's accessing, I would say I would keep the open data.
Yeah, but so with the open data, the problem that Bert says that open data means different things for different countries. So if we put it there, then some people will say it's open data and other people will not agree. And therefore the term is sensitive. I think also Matthias made that comment. Better avoid to use terms that might be sensitive or might have different connotations. So therefore, the proposal is to change open data as a term which it means something to people to saying publicly or openly accessible, which is more neutral, I would say. Do you agree with that, Alberto?
No, and in fact, I want to warn against some multinationals that they are doing, oh, we work with public data, calling it open data. And then when you go to the public data, you see a very restrictive licensing.
Yeah,
so
I understand. But yeah. Alberto, just one thing, don't mix things. You're mixing now. You say also, I think you're actually confirmed that the term open data is being used differently by different people. So our proposal is to keep it out of the definition here. Yeah. See what I mean?
Yeah, but the alternative that we are proposing, I don't think that we are fixing that much.
Well, we delete open data as the term, which was what Brett says is the objective. So can we just, if you have more problems with it, maybe we can then move that to the GitHub issue 301. I haven't seen any suggestions. I see on there's some discussion on the chat.
Yeah, so I see that there's a request, and then some followed it to remove avoid the term open completely. So we can be, for me as well, public accessible. If that is the more
publicly accessible.
Publicly accessible has access restriction or is not public. So this is the minor change I would like to propose.
I see also Geraldine says public or non-public, and that would also mean that we delete the open word and just publicly accessible as access restrictions or is not public.
Yeah, so can we vote for that just to know if we agree? So public accessible.
Publicly accessible.
Yeah, publicly accessible, yes.
Yep. I see 1+1 from Michelle.
Yeah, so
just one from Geraldine. I saw one. We're getting +1s on the publicly accessible, and then I would say that Alberto, if you have any further comments, then please make them in the issue at 301. So we can
okay. Thank you, Max.
Yeah. Okay. For the rest, I see +1s. So I would take that provisionally as an agreement.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. So this is resolving one minor one complexity in the issues. The other thing, it comes with the connection with the code list that is associated with it. Mm-hmm. So if we look to the code list, then we have essentially a number of values into it, but the values actually are shared across the two categories, the two classes where we are using it, data service and a data set. And what you see into the access right public, and this is the text, the definitional text that is associated with it, publicly accessible by everyone. And then a usage note, permissible obstacles include registration and request for API keys, as long as anyone can request such registration and or API keys. So you see that here, there is kind of a mix between it is without limitations and some limitations are permissible. And the last part is mentioning actually connected to data services only. Whereas if you talk about the data set as such, you probably only consider the first sentence. So this is the challenge, and this gets into, can we then use the code public for a data service or not? Is it the same term, and etc. So yeah, this conflict of usage, we try to avoid, or we think it's better to avoid. And our proposal is that we would create a separate code list for each of the usage contexts, so that we can say, in the case of an access right public for a data set, it's publicly accessible by everyone, and then for a data service, access right public data service, accessible by everyone with permissible obstacles, including etc.
So this is the proposal, to have two separate controlled vocabularies. And Bert, is one of them the one that is already there?
Yeah, so we have to split, and probably will be a new one then for data service. I would do that. Then.
So how many values would there be for data service then? The same amount, the same 3 values with the same value, public, protected?
Yeah, currently 6 values: confidential, non-public, normal, public, restricted, and sensitive.
We have to see for the data service if there are the same values to be there needed, and so on. Because the data sets are related to legal basis, so you can relate to a legal accessibility level, so that you can do that. The API might be, data services might be simpler.
I think that you need to come back with a more clear list for us to be able to have a clear opinion on this.
So what you're proposing, Matthias, is that we need to have in issue 302, I think, a list of terms for both of these controlled vocabularies.
Yes.
One for data sets and one for data services.
I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with it. I'm just saying I don't know. I would need to see the options, and from right now I have a hard time to getting my head around the distinctions made and whether it will actually make sense for end users to provide this information, because in the end there will be people that we have to instruct and teach how to fill in these values, and if they don't understand what we are talking about, there's no value in having this conversation. I will say keep the 3 values we have now.
And I also see 2 -1s from Songord and Matthias Grunwald. And Matthias Palmer, you said it's splitting hairs. So we need to, I think, Bert, come up with a more specific, clear proposal of what those differences are. And then if those lists are there, we might actually see that there is no real difference, so that we could continue with what we have. So we need a better proposal. That's in issue 302. I proposed, Bert, that you provide the complete proposal. Simon, you have a comment?
Yes, and also please keep in mind that we are talking here about semantic, and the public means public. So this is the same as semantic, either on data service or data sets, and we should keep that in one definition and not in 2.
So you have to see that this is sometimes subtle, in the sense of, and the reason why this becomes in the issue where it's raised was, can you say that something is a data set is public if you have a restriction on the API, and is that the only way to get its access to it? So do you consider that as a difference or not?
Yeah, well, then we need first to identify and define what we mean by public. And then we can decide if we need a different vocabulary, or do we need an additional vocabulary that means public this, public that. So
yeah. Let's do it then, Bert. I think the feeling is that this proposal is not mature enough.
But that was,
there needs to be a little bit of further analysis and a fuller proposal so that people can actually see what the implications are. Songor?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, just a quick comment. So I can imagine, for example, a public data set. So a data set which has access right public and a service that doesn't allow public access to that data set. So because of the APIs and other things, but maybe you can access it from a different service, the same data set. So I think those, even though they use the same access, the same vocabulary like public, you could have different values for in the same catalog for the service and the service that accesses that data set. So that doesn't need to have two separate list. Yeah.
Cutoff vocabularies. Yes, it could be, that's an alternative. But let's
let's have this discussion on issue 302, and then we'll have to come back with a fuller proposal which takes into account some of the examples that were given here today.
Yeah.
Brett?
Okay. Yes, this is what I'm
here, and then move that to GitHub, and then we'll move on to the next.
Can I say something too still? Because the values of the code list today are not distinctive at this point as well, because if it's sensitive or confidential, it's maybe not open. So it's not distinctive if you have to use then sensitive or confidential or not public. So that's very trivial to fill in as an end user if you don't have a total list of distinctions. So we only have two values out of that code list because it's not clear how they have to fill in the Flanders level. So we do public and non-public because the other ones are not ambiguous at all. So I think we have to recheck on the values in there as well, not only in do we need separate ones between services and data sets, but also are the values of today clear enough and their definitions as well.
Yes, and I think that's part of the discussion then. Also, what is the subset of terms from that vocabulary that we can use? But let's put that all in the discussion on issue number 302.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
what we can do, we can have the break now. It's 3 o'clock.
Yes, we can have, maybe we can have the break. Yes.
5-minute break, and then we come back with the data set series at 5 minutes past the hour. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
See you then.
Let's continue, Max.
Yes, we're back.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
We go now on the section on everything what has to do with the alignment with DCAT 3, and in particular, we're looking into what is dataset series are bringing into us. So the first slides are more about information, about better understanding that we reach through the issues on what are the possibilities that W3C DCAT offers us to describe and to use dataset series. So if we have the two following case, so we have a dataset series A, which has two datasets, A1 and A2 into it, which are connected in a chain with each other. And then we have a dataset series B, which are connected as well with each other. And now we assume, let's assume that a dataset A2 and dataset B2 are the same dataset. Then we get this kind of network, knowledge network. And what happens is that at that point in time, it becomes indistinguishable from which elements are followed or becomes to follow just via the pref layering. So you have to be really combined and have to be ensuring that everything is in the dataset series. Otherwise, if you just would follow the pref, you don't know which one you have to follow. So this is something that it makes it more difficult to see and to handle in it, the dataset series. So you have to be aware of this challenge that just basing ourselves on the pref relationship, you cannot know of the ordering relationship next, which dataset series you are working. So this is a topic which is challenging, and I think yeah, we have to add this into a usage note, that you have to keep it simple as much as possible, and that when you start to use multiple dataset series together and mixing them, then it might become getting to indeterminate behavior of if everything is still connected in the right way. I think it would be good that we inform W3C about this case too. So this is the topic that we want to raise, and that you should be aware of when using datasets in the context of multiple dataset series. Any comments? So be aware of it, not.
So what you're basically saying is, because it is a case that is not covered by W3C, we should inform W3C about the problem that it might create if you have data sets that are a member of two series.
Yeah.
So it's something that we can't solve because it is not in the W3C specification.
And a second question which was raised and where we want to bring attention to is that the following situation: we have a dataset series, and instead of that, the dataset is just a dataset, and that's ending it. It is as well a dataset series. So you see that in the example and the figure that you have, the dataset series B is part of the series of dataset series A, the collection of that. So there is no mentioning, neither in DCAT, neither in DCAT-AP, that would prohibit this. So as such, it is allowed. We only want to highlight that this is, yeah, you have to be careful, and this might have side effects on how you have to specify your metadata.
But again, I think this is something, because it's not foreseen in W3C, there is no real solution for it. And as you say, that if people have cases where this is relevant, then we need to see what the recommendation would be.
Yeah. So we don't have a recommendation to exclude it, to say it's not bad, it is bad practice, neither it is a good practice. And if it's in the case of a good practice, what are the additional requirements we have to take into account? So here we have to come with examples and to see and to give us cases that we have to work upon.
Any comments on these 2 points on data sets into data series, or data series as part of another data series? Are there any comments there where people have suggestions or?
I have a meta comment.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remind ourselves what the purpose of having DCAT-AP is. Is it to theoretically investigate all potential solutions to what the DCAT spans and gives us the possibility to do? Or is it to provide guidance to the community and hack away one few of the, although potential, but maybe not so necessary interpretations of what you can do with DCAT? Yeah. And I think it is good to inform V3C of this potential strange situations that may appear. At the same time, I would encourage everyone to start thinking about, maybe we should start thinking about more simple cases of data series, because implementation wise it will take some time and there will be confusion, and maybe we should just start with aiming for the simple cases and support those from a start, and then maybe add on and provide guidance further for more complicated use cases along the way.
Yeah, and I think what Bert also said on the previous slide, there is a comment in GitHub of people in the community who raised the issue. I think the situation that we have, as Matthias said, is these might be too theoretical. If there is someone who needs to worry about that, it's probably the W3C group. Then we'll leave it at that. And as Bert said on this slide, if the case arises when people really have the problem of an existing situation, then we might need to investigate. But until such time, we do not investigate. Is that correct, Bert?
Yes, indeed. We keep it, as Matthias mentioned, to the simple case, and we want to support, let's say, our recommendations at this moment with the simple case and to go forward on that level. And the complex case, you're a bit on your own to investigate what are the blocking factors into that implementation.
And the simple case is a simple data set series points to a set, or the data set belongs to one data set series, and not too many. There was another suggestion that I had, maybe not thousands of data sets in one data set series, but maybe we cannot agree on that. I don't know.
But let's leave it at that. There's no action at this point, unless there is someone who comes forward with a use case that needs to be considered. But for the time being, we're not going to consider those cases. Okay, is that agreed?
Okay, good.
Let's see, +1.
Okay, good. So we keep it simple at the moment.
I also see that there has been a continuing discussion in the chat. I think this was on the access rights. So I would suggest people to have those discussions in the issue that we just referred to, 302. Don't forget your arguments there, but we'll make sure that you can have that discussion on GitHub.
Okay. So then, if we look to the data sets that are a member of a dataset series, we have a list of number of properties that we have associated with that one. with those data sets that are really a member of a dataset series. So you could categorize DCAT-AP datasets in two groups. Those are just DCAT-AP datasets and have no connection to a dataset series, or those who are connection to a dataset series. And about those, we have some additional guidelines and information that you can express. And it was unclear which properties and so on to apply and so on. So just to highlight here first that the description and title are exactly the ones and inherited from DCAT-AP datasets. So there's are the same ones, just as a reminder here listed. I'll come later on to the proposal on that. There are other properties, and then in particular frequency, where there is an additional usage node. So to take care, if you are a data set that is a member of a collection of in the dataset series, then you should read this usage node and see if you match that semantic, so that usage of the frequency. And then we have three properties that are uniquely associated with the fact that you are, as a dataset, a member of a dataset series. So what we would like to ask you is, well, now these are very few properties, frequency and in series, next and previous, that are uniquely associated with this local usage scope. Are there any others that you see and that we should add? There were some mentioning about spatial coverage and temporal coverage, like this is of interest. But I would like to have more information than just this is of interest. So if you have a concrete proposal, for instance, about spatial coverage, and it should be this usage node, let us know.
So you're asking for suggestions so that we can discuss whether or not those properties are useful and necessary. And you're saying you're creating a new issue for that?
So this is the issue 278. That's you can.
So the discussion can take place in issue 278.
Yeah, indeed. So if you have ideas, but please be more concrete than it is of interest, because.
So use cases and examples would be.
Yeah, or a suggestion for usage node or whatever. That's those cases.
Okay.
Okay, then I have to go back to W3C DCAT about inverse properties. So the community raised us that there is some guidelines in W3C DCAT about the use of inverse properties, and we were not following them in the case of dataset series. So therefore, this slide. So W3C introduces those properties and their inverses and imposes a specific direction. It says, if you use the other one, the inverse one, then you also have to provide the other one. So it forces the existence of one direction, and the other one is optionally to add. So from a perspective of a data exchange between two DCAT systems, this directionality gives some trust that you as a user or receiver of that exchange, you only have to query one direction, because you then know that it has the complete information. So you don't have to make something complete out of it. If I check and I check the list on table, it has no impact on our current properties on the DCAT2, but it has impact on the choices we had for the discussions we had in the past on dataset series properties. So first proposal is just to add a short usage note section about this, so that the community, the readers of DCAT-AP, are also aware about this recommendation, this guideline in DCAT.
Okay.
Any questions on that? No.
No, I see.
One thing, this implicitly has an effect that we don't allow data series across catalogs. I just want to state that because I know that it's not necessarily so easy to see how that would be realized if you point in that direction. But if you point from the data set series to the data set and don't require the inverse to be present, which DCAT says the opposite, I'm aware of this. But if we have another use case, what do we do with this use case? Do we say this is not within the scope of current DCAT and we discard it? Or do we bring this to V3C and say, we have another scenario which we would like to support, therefore reverse your position on inverse properties regarding this?
So that might be indeed an argument that we have to motivate towards W3C change. It would be good as well to understand the use cases in the context of DCAT-AP or the setting here, so that we can elaborate and that the whole community is aware of this kind of use case. And then see, maybe we have to make a more broader interpretation or additional interpretation for this.
I just want to point out that I did provide such a use case. It's in one of the issues. I forgot the number right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I will have to look for it then again. But just maybe I've overlooked this one.
But currently there is no change proposed here. It's just for information.
Yeah, this is for information.
Looking at the use case that Matthias provided, and then if necessary, I think one proposal was to inform W3C about use cases that are currently not envisaged by W3C for DCAT. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if we follow it, and so this is the concrete proposal, the impact of all the discussions on which is the preferred direction for series members or in series. Then if we follow the W3C guideline, we have to provide in series. So which points from a data set to a data set series. And the other one is optional. And in order to avoid, and that's what the proposal that we have had in mind, is that DCAT-AP implementers would have the temptation to implement still series members without in series present. We will propose to remove series members from the profile, from DCAT-AP profile, so that you only see the direction that is recommended by W3C DCAT. So this is the proposal, so that all exchanges of DCAT-AP would only keep in series.
Okay. And I see that Terje just provided the link to the example, the use case that Matthias provided. So
and is that blocking because in series cannot handle that one, or it makes it difficult, Terje?
But it's the link is to the use case that Matthias provided. So
exactly. Just to chip in, I think like as far as I can see, the use case of Matthias, where you have catalogs across, dataset series across actors or agents, different agents, this would be more or less impossible, or if it's at least very difficult with a lot of overhead. So I think it diminishes the user friendliness of the profile. But I also see your issues with how to deal with this, and it's maybe a V3C issue.
Okay. So it is related to this this distinction that of this decision by W3C to use only in series.
Yes. So I think it needs to be analyzed, Bert.
Yeah.
And then I think currently this is the proposal that stands, but you need to investigate whether that makes it impossible to do certain things that are necessary.
And this case, Matthias and Terje, over multiple catalogs, this referencing, is that a case that you have today?
It's a case that has been requested. Basically, it's possibility for a regional actor to collect data sets across multiple actors that they are responsible for, and to provide higher level data set series.
Okay.
There's more discussion necessary there, and that will then take place on issue 296.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I also just add, like I'm also thinking about it. I'm also there might be implications if B2C reverses the or changes the inverse property here. That might also have implications or make other use cases more difficult. So there are like several aspects here to consider.
Okay.
Songor had a comment that
yes, just one comment, a short one. So basically, if you remove the series member, I don't know if this will solve the problem, because I mean, anyway, the idea would be to make the in-series explicitly mandatory in our profile and leave the series member optional. Then the users would see that actually they have to provide. So if it's a mandatory property, the in-series, then they would see that they have to provide it, and then they have the option to provide the other one. But if you hide it kind of, and they discover that, wait, DCAT AP, you can use this in DCAT, sorry, not in DCAT AP, but you could use it in DCAT. It's kind of, they might use it. I don't think there is anything wrong in leaving that and explicitly saying it's optional. So that's my suggestion. I wouldn't remove it because that will just create more questions, and especially if somebody looks at DCAT. So yeah, just make them, both of them, explicitly mandatory and optional, and then I think it's clear. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, can we get that suggestion also in issue 296?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Then we go for similar. So here, previous and next, pref or next. So W3C imposes the use of pref. So we saw the examples that we already used pref over there. Exactly the same argument or the same approach we would take over there. Is there any argumentation from the community to have next at the same level as pref?
I think this is a simpler proposal because
Yeah.
if you have the prefs, then you can actually infer the next. But are there people, what's people's opinion? Are people in agreement, or would there be objections to removing the next from the profile? Songor again?
I would just say the same here, that making pref mandatory would be clear that they need to provide it, and if they want to provide next, some people can, right? Why would you hide it so that they don't even know, and then they would come, okay, but I want to express also the next, but it's not there, right? So it's, I would leave both. Again, my argumentation is the same as for previous in the previous case, and that would be it.
Any other comments?
I'm thinking of why would we need them at all? Why not remove both? If we need to have an order of data sets in a dataset series, clearly we can order them based on alphabet, or we can on when they have been created, or some other property. This way of manually creating an order, I think it's clearly overstated. I don't know if we have a need for it, and it creates so much problems. You already raised issues with it earlier, and I wonder, is it really needed? Do anyone here need it? Do we have use cases for it?
That's a good question. Huh? So that's indeed,
if it's merely theoretical of useful and interesting, then I think we need to be clear that it's actually going to be used. And if it's not going to be used, then we don't probably need it in the profile.
I mean, just to clarify, the way we are going to use it in the portal right now is that we are going to make a query, give me all data sets that have an in-series relation to the series I'm looking at right now. And then based on the results, I can provide in the query a way of sorting them based on alphabet or on some other property, or it's not going to be based on a next, because that would require us to do a client-side sorting or some additional indexing cleverness in the system that we're not going to do. And I'm sure that very few other portals will do any kind of order based on next properties and set an index like an integer, which we can actually do a sorting based on Solar or Elasticsearch or anything. So I assume this is not going to be used anywhere.
And I see also Matthias Grunwald says doesn't really see the need for it. So is it the counter proposal is to remove both breadth and next?
Yeah, that's.
And while I'm at it, I would also like to remove the first and whatever it's called from the dataset series, a way of pointing to last and first or something. I forgot the name of them. I don't see a need for that one either.
Yeah. Yeah. But Matthias Grunwald says he wants to keep them both optional. So that was the proposal, to make the profile less complex by deleting things that are not really going to be used.
Yeah, so if it's optional, in a sense, it would correspond to exactly the W3C semantics. So removing means you still have it in your presence availability, it's still available, but we as DCAT-AP don't make any additional recommendation, additional statement about it. It's up to you to use it or not. So it's not, you cannot expect that this is there and has certain particular way of working.
But yes, want to make sure that there is already a lot of decisions being made. For instance, on the dataset series, data service level. Why don't we include a lot of the properties that we actually inherit from DCAT resource? Someone has made a decision at some point. I don't remember there being a lot of discussion there, not including a lot of the properties. And in this case, we have the same scenario. We are assuming that we just need to have them, but in the other scenario, we didn't assume that need to have them.
Yeah. So exactly, that's a good argument to the reason why this is the good question. Do we have a use case why we would recommend as DCAT-AP to use it, and for what purpose? And if we don't have it, then there is no difference with DCAT at all.
Then we can delete it from the profile.
And then we can remove it from the profile. In a sense, it becomes anyhow available, but not, let's say, in the profile as something that we have said something about.
Okay, I think that was the proposal then, to remove both of them. Yeah. Anyone? Did someone agree?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's Matthias also said that's his idea. I see no objections to removing them both.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. So we have to speed up a little bit, so Bert.
Yeah, I'll see it. Yes. Okay, so we have a question on the catalogs at the level of the catalog and how it's organized. And in W3C DCAT, there has been a sub-property called Data Catalogue. Now, it might be slipped through in DCAT2, but it's now has been raised. And as it is the case that in our current profile, we have we use the property DCT has part to interconnect catalogs with each other. So in DCAT-AP, the usage of DCT has part at the level of the catalog is pointed to another catalog, and that creates this catalog network. And it actually has the same restrictions as what is proposed as the definition for DCAT catalog. So it corresponds to that. So the set of restrictions on our usage in DCAT-AP on DCT has part is equivalent to the one that are expressed with a unique property in W3C DCAT, namely DCAT catalog. And in the whole, if you read the whole specification around DCT has part, then you see that in W3C, this property has been lifted, opened up as the super property, what about everything that has to do with a part of or member of relationship. So it is, let's say, as a fallback or aggregation part property being used now rather than a specific use for it. So in that case, to make it more precise and more aligned with the semantics, the proposal is to change DCT has part mapping, that has part that is in catalog to DCAT catalog. This is the proposal.
Could I just point out that this was discussed further in the issue, and Hagar pointed out that there was a distinction between has part and catalog. That catalog pointed more to a catalog as a data set, while has part was more in line with subset. And there are different use cases for this. And in the the use cases we, at least in Sweden, use is has part as a subset. And that's the way we have interpreted it. And from this perspective, I don't think we should replace it with catalog.
And I see Hagar is also not in agreement.
So can you explain the difference, because it is very subtle, and
Yes, sorry about that. Okay, here I come right to work. Yes, but Matthias already explained. Basically, the issue is the use case we were thinking of is having the possibility to infer the data sets that are in the subcatalog as part of the top level catalog, and with DCAT catalog that cannot be maintained. So this was my subsequent note where I myself rejected use of DCAT catalog. However, I think there is a bit of confusion between when to use one property or the other. So this is why I left it open, maybe by changing the range of DCT has part to any resource. It would be clearer, because right now we have two similar properties with the same range. But I'm not sure this would resolve the issue, the confusion. But
yes,
and again, a catalog of catalogs, maybe Data Europa could have some use case for that, but then they still need to infer the data sets that are in each one of those. So I cannot think of any use case of DCAT catalog property, whereas the DCT has part, yes.
Yeah, so but suppose you do the aggregation of, you see the catalog aggregated here on the picture, then you could derive a DCAT data set from the aggregated catalog to A1 and to B1, because you have aggregated that together. Well, DCAT data set to the one and DCAT service to the other, sorry. So you, with these two properties, you then indicate that you are part of the aggregated catalog. So I don't see the need for has part to represent something else as something super of DCAT data sets.
No, well, it's a very subtle difference, but I don't think you can infer that with DCAT catalog as a property, because it basically says a list catalogs that are listed in another catalog. So the inference that the data sets of these listed catalogs belong to the parent catalog is not explicit. It's not there. So this is why in our use case, we need DCT has part.
Sweden as well. So we cannot point directly from the aggregated catalog to A1 and B1 based on the DCAT catalog property, which is exactly what we need. It's exactly what we do. We harvest multiple catalogs, and then we just throw away these catalogs and point directly to A1 and B1 from the aggregated one. That's what we want to achieve. With the DCAT catalog property, we cannot do that. We need a has part for that.
But maybe DCAT catalog can be dropped just like the other properties we just dropped, because I don't really see a specific use case in the DCAT AP application, so to avoid confusion, unless there is a use case for DCAT catalog property. Maybe drop it, and then with DCT has part, we should accommodate relevant use cases.
In the interest of time, can I suggest that the discussion takes place on issue 292?
Yeah, okay, because I still have it's good that
more discussion is necessary. It's clear.
Yeah,
so, I don't think we're 20 minutes before the end of the the webinar, so I think that we can't have the discussion here.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So unfortunately, because it would be nice to understand.
Sorry, we're not. So you had your hand up, but we're not going to have the discussion here. We're going to have it on GitHub.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't want to say anything. I forgot my hand. Sorry.
Okay. So here, this one, I would like, and this is what we referenced earlier in the webinar. So Matthias has filed a number of proposals to make a number of properties recommended. We already discussed publisher. Documentation was last time, I think, as well discussed. But we have now, we ask you about ContactPoint conforms to theme, keyword, and landing page into the poll, so that we know which one has interest from you as a community to make them recommended, because we don't know. Yeah. And we really want that you say no if you think, and if you're not if you think that you're not going to use it or not are able to provide the value in a substantial amount. So if you say, okay, it's once in a while it is available, then vote no. So we really want to make something that is recommended where there is a basis to that substantial amount of values are present.
Okay, the link here, the QR, is to the Slido.
Yes.
Everybody is invited to provide your opinion there.
Could just say that I want them to be mentioned. That's actually my argument. Not necessarily that they have to be recommended or optional, but at least mentioned in the profile, included in the profile.
But that's a slightly separate topic, but we want now for the vote, this is really about recommended. So if you really want to have them additional, and you think that there's some need for that.
Okay, so please provide your, it's also in the chat, there's a link to the Slido, so please provide your opinions there. Brett, you need to follow up with the next part of the presentation because you only have 15 minutes.
We only have 15 minutes. Okay. Okay, so will be then very short. So unfortunately, we will not have a long discussion on. We will share the outcome. Wait, first we will share the outcome of your votes on a GitHub issue on this one, and to see what the outcome is. So, or maybe at the end, and William can show it already, but we'll do it. We'll continue on that. So on the profile building, so we have prepared some discussion thing on it. I would like to have a longer discussion on it. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. So what is the goal? Is that we want to create profiles which are concise, so easiness to read. The editorial effort is acceptable, and so take that into account. That there's a balance with the implementation efforts on it, and as well that if we create a profile and we have existing data sets available, that the new profile is extending the metadata of that existing data set in a let's say extendable way and not in a conflicting way, so that it is just for the editors that have data already published. They have to do a little bit of extra work to be compliant. So this is the objective of the whole setting of the profile guidelines. We have been discussing this internally, and we see that there's a need to lift this as well beyond DCAT-AP, and then we are connecting this with the SDMX style guide. So we will create out of this interaction and a blog article where we will as well explain and try to stimulate a discussion on profile building and profile interactions with you, and to create out of that guidelines that we can apply for all SDMX specifications, and that you can apply as well further on. So it is a complex and a difficult task. So there with many different opinions, it sometimes gets abstract. So unfortunately, that's the case, but still it is relevant for the community, because we know that in the context of the data spaces, more profiles are coming, and we want to make them assets well balanced and well integrated.
And to complement to this, the intention also is to have a clear view on the approach of creating application profiles in order to include them in the official release of DCAT-AP version 3 to reach a consensus with the community, and to include the outcome to the specifications.
So when looking to the discussions, and so which partially has been raised on GitHub already, so there's one issue that had a very long exchange, and if we look to that, we see that there are a number of questions underpinning that we have to deal with. So how to indicate what are the constraints and properties that apply for one class to another class. So that is a question that is often recurring into it. And the second one is how to use a property that has conflicting constraints with from one profile to another profile, how to deal with that. And finally, of course, this leads to how you can say that profile A is coherent or consistent with profile B, and what are the changes with each other. I'm going to skip the whole storyline here a bit, because I still want to share the proposals for conclusions. That's what I'm going to do. There's a building up of a thing, and that what it happens is that we end up in a class diagram, as what you see here is what in the end we have in DCAT-AP, where the arrows mean the same constraints and rules apply, and where this equal sign indicates that there's a difference, where there's a simpler interpretation is, namely that the DCAT-AP dataset is something different as a DCAT-AP dataset series. You have to be careful, and you have to be careful if that is the same. So that's what we want to point out with this slide, that be careful, do this at your own risk, because it's not 100% guaranteed that this is compatible, a DCAT-AP dataset series together with a DCAT-AP dataset. So you have to be careful if you do that. This corresponds to the mentioning we had earlier on keep it simple first. With the conflicting, that I'll come to the proposal. So what we have on the proposals, we want to go forward still with somehow practical and result this into something that we can use for DCAT-AP, creating DCAT-AP profiles. So first of all, one of the things we would like your attention to is one of the conflict resolutions is that we want to state that DCAT-AP is the master profile. Okay, DCAT is the master, but it is very generic and open. For the profiles in the ecosystem of data spaces, we would say DCAT-AP is the master profile, and as a consequence, if DCAT-AP imposes a constraint, then the other profile should follow. So this is the thing. If we do so, certain things are impacted in design, in current profiles or in profile creation. But we will see that DCAT-AP as well slowly becomes more and more generic over time. Still giving direction, but becomes more and more generic. So this is the first proposal. The second proposal is, and that was the part of the slides that I skipped, is that if you are creating a profile and in that profile you want to use a property, a DCAT property, with different conflicting constraints as it is expressed in DCAT-AP, typically I want to use it with another code list, that the mandatory one which is expressed in DCAT-AP, then a new property in the profile namespace has to be made. And that profile, you link it as a sub-property of the DCAT property. In that way, the conflict is resolved, and then it is easier to implement. It is easier to describe what are the semantics, and the interoperability between the different profiles is easier to guarantee. So this is a profile guideline. A third profile guideline is more what the current practice is doing, and to confirm on that is that when we indicate a subclass relationship, that in the arrow and in the diagrams, then we would say it means all properties, all constraints of that superclass are inherited. That's the semantics of it. If we map it on the URI, it means that the semantics are shared. That's exactly the same semantics as the what is on the URI. And we would, and this is something still ongoing, to avoid changes to definitions. So if you create a sub-profile of DCAT-AP, don't change the definition, but we have to apply this as well with regard to DCAT, W3C DCAT, and we'll use usage notes to inform and to express the particular usage scope more.
But to clarify, this is a diagrammatic rule. It's not something about RDFS or any formal application profile expression.
This is diagrammatic, and it's the interpretation of the diagram, how we have done the mapping, and what is the semantics behind that. Yes.
Right. So there is still no. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. This rule is about reuse of, let's say, repetition of properties. So if you reuse a property and it has no changes of the superclass of then the repetition is not needed. You have not to do it. If you do it, we should include a clear indication. So at this moment, this is where an activity that we have to do with DCAT-AP and DCAT-AP Annex for high-value data sets. It's not always that clear, so we have to provide way more better indications for that. Now, this applies cross-profile too. So if the property is reused from a superclass in another profile and it has no changes, then the repetition is not needed. So in the case of the high-value data set, if we reuse the title of a data set and we have no additional statement about it, then that's not needed to do that. If we do so, then we have to indicate it way clearer as it is today that there are no changes.
But again, now the wording here, superclass. If you are using a data set in a national profile, we are still going to call it the data set, DCAT data set. There is no subclassing going on.
Yeah,
correct.
Programmatic level, your Swedish data set, if you would put it on a diagram, you probably would indicate it visually as a subclass of DCAT-AP. To have the French and the German data sets next to it.
Yes, but the name inside of the box would then not be formally a class. And therefore, we have a problem with the way we draw this in the diagram, because if we write DCAT dataset, and then you're going to have a DCAT :dataset -SE or something, it becomes clear that this is not a class, it's a profile. And that's part of the whole discussion we had in the issue, that we don't want to talk about this as classes.
Yeah, so this is the thing where we have to mitigate the visual language of the class versus profiling, etc. I use the class diagram, entity class diagram, to use that wording. So I use that one. Otherwise, I don't know how to call it.
Can I just add something? So there is a way of using really the profile language, so to say, and the stereotypes in UML to avoid these superclasses, and to do these profiles are actually realizations of the classes that they don't inherit, but that they modify. So for that we have a very concrete proposal of how to do that, and it won't be confusing. So what I mean is, we won't use the inheritance, the superclass, subclass arrows, right? The generalization, but another arrow, and also the profiles themselves, the profile classes or class profiles, better to. Are different from the class themselves. So yeah, I am writing about this actually, and I can share that article soon with the interested ones. I think it's a quite elegant solution.
Yeah, but what I want to highlight here is about the repetition of the properties. And if you see in the profile, the repetition of the properties, I want to highlight that repetition is not needed. And if you do it, we have to make it explicitly flagged so that we have an unambiguous reading of this is a repetition, because that we observed by many feedback that it was unclear whether this was a repetition or there was something changed or not. So this is we want to highlight with this proposal of a guideline, that we want to ensure that the repetition is meaningful for some reason.
I agree with the intention, not with the language used and the necessary binding here to the UML class diagrams, which I think is unfortunate because it cannot capture this in a good way. Stereotypes may solve this, other relationships may solve this, but I think we are causing problems with people that are conflicting classes with application profiles or entity profiles, whatever we want to call them. But that's a longer discussion. So
yeah. So, but here it's about repetition. I want to on this one. I think this is clear. The last point is that, and this is a challenge, and it's one of the discussions that indeed was ongoing, is that what with this subclass dataset in series, Matthias, I keep on the word on using that one. This is a scoping, and so dataset in series is a local scoped dataset in DCAT-AP with a particular usage. And so what is that, can we allow it or can we not allow it? And the proposal is that this way of doing allows us to have more clear scoped constraints to be expressed, sometimes easier to read because you can focus only on that scoping, and it avoids complex sentences in usage notes that if this property is used in scope A, then you should apply rule Y. So to avoid this kind of complexity into the whole set of properties we have of DCAT-AP datasets or any other class. So our proposal is the following. If we look to it, is that if you use local scope subclasses, if you do this local scoping, then there must be a clear indication of the local scope. You can do it, you can name it, because you name it, you can give the definition of the local scope. You can associate clear the semantics associated with it, but it requires how to implement improved implementation guidelines or data exchange guidelines for those. If we alternative say, if this local scope becomes so large and you have to explain so many things about it, like for instance, we could say the high value data sets are kind of this more general scope, then yeah, we need a separate document. Then we can express in that separate document, again, the semantics very clear. There's probably less need for additional implementation guidelines, but the drawback is that we have an extra document to manage. So our advice is that if the scope is small and limited, such local scope can be accepted to be documented properly. Otherwise, if the scope becomes larger and more extensive, a new document has to be created. That would be the conflict resolution for those elements. Okay, so this is the balancing act that we have been looking for, how we can deal with it and how we have to handle it.
Bert, any discussion on the profile guideline proposals? Will those be on GitHub for people to react to what you just said?
But we will create a new issues for that, because today they are not. So yeah, sorry for rushing a bit through it and going directly to the proposals, but I think it was worthwhile at least to share with you these concrete proposals so that you have at least a thoughts over what it can be. We will create for those new issues.
But further discussion can take place on GitHub on those proposals.
Could I just ask, will there be any formalism except the diagrammatic one?
You mean that there are specific formalisms changing?
Like local scope subclasses should be expressed using shackle?
Yes, we could. This is something on the implementation guidelines, etc., where we have to work upon. Yes. Yeah. that's put into that one.
Okay. I think that completes your proposals for profiles.
Yes. Okay, thank you at least for all this feedback. Maybe William, can you share, just to wrap up, the ones on the proposal on the voting?
Yes.
Just then we
I'll share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Can you just read it out loud a bit and then?
Yes. So for ContactPoint, there was 83% agreement. For conforms to 68. For the team, there's 75% agreement. For keywords, 65, and for landing page, 67.
Okay, so the most is team, and what's above? I think. So ContactPoint, certainly. I think that's a really good recommendation. And for team, there's as well 3/4 of it, I think. And so we have to look for the others.
So I think better, even if it's 83-17, I think it would still be interesting to know why people would vote no on the proposal.
Yeah, you see that for the bottom
valid.
one, there's way no's. So yeah.
So I think this is something for further work, for further discussions.
Yeah.
It's going to take that also on in the issues on GitHub, I guess.
Yes.
So you're creating a new issue for this, and then invite people to comment.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially the people who are not in agreement, to voice what their objections are. Yep.
Maybe also take the idea of the locally scoped classes or profiles, whatever, into account, and here see if there are two different sets of data services where this makes sense to have them or not have them, like dependent, independent, as suggested in an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Let's do that. And then we move to the next steps.
Okay. So what? Thank you for all the feedback. So we take that and work on a new DCAT AP3 specification based on all this feedback, so that we have a more consolidated version for you to read and to comment upon. We will work, as mentioned by Tsongo and earlier on this profile building in a blog article from the perspective, in the broadest perspective of style guide. So that's in that sense, or the broader perspective. And the first thing, of course, what we'll do, and we mentioned in the first webinar, is that we want to finalize and have a stable release of the DCAT AP Annex for high-value datasets. So that one is the first one we want to fully wrap up. And as mentioned in the previous webinar, the specification will be compliant with DCAT AP3. That is.
I also note that Agatha has pointed to probably a new issue for further discussion: quality of data. And I think,
well, it is just out of curiosity, because I'm not a technically advanced person. I'm rather lawyer and modeler and architect than the one who is inside the technology. I mean, in the very inside. Still, what we see from the legal perspective is the obligation to check on every step whether we are dealing with the data which is some sort of proper. I mean, you cannot proceed the error which happens to be on the very beginning. So the heritage, the classical model of heritage of data, or the types, or modeling is not appropriate when we taking into consideration the model of legal system, which oblige each and every step to take care about checking whether we are dealing with something non-erroneous. So I know it may sound some sort of complicated, but it is the main difference between inheriting facilities, considering technology, and the obligation to avoid improper inheritance.
Okay,
I'm not sure whether I've tried to clarify my my question properly. Still, I would like you to just consider how one can avoid proceeding or reusing the set of data that somehow at the very initial stage was improper to be allowed to be qualified as the proper information or the information that is reliable, for example.
Okay, so I think it's a good point. I think it's not for today, but I certainly think it's a good, and we can get in contact with you if we want to have that discussion in the future.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, my camera just turned on.
Okay, so Pavlina, you want to say the words at the end?
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar. It's very important for us. We would like to encourage you for the open issues as well as the ones that has to do with the profiling approach and the blog post that is going to be published to have your contribution so that we can better improve ourselves in terms of presenting our specification, but also to how we approach the different open issues. And with that, I leave. I would like to wish you a very pleasant evening.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll hear from us with new issues and with the report that will also be shared with you.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.